One of the questions I get asked the most is, what does Terrier 55 Stepney actually mean? We know Terriers are a breed of dog, 55 is the number after 54, but what is a Stepney? It seems not everyone knows or cares about the real Stepney, the Bluebell engine, so here's a bit of a facty video exploring its roots and explaining its significance. So, why does this steam engine deserve a video exploring its history? What are all these wires doing cluttered on its cab? And what was smuggled aboard the engine when it made its final run from the scrap heap? Firstly, to explain why this engine exists at all. It's 1870. William Stroudley has just been promoted from the Highland Railway to become the chief mechanical engineer at the bigger, more chaotic London, Brighton and South Coast Railway. Short-sighted and asthmatic, he was a respected and approachable figure who also knew how to fit the bill as a Victorian ruler when it was required of him. It is said that he expressed his disapproval by banging the tip of his umbrella on the ground, something that was feared across the line. Heavy traffic on the South London lines desperately needed a lightweight engine that could handle the weak wrought iron rails and tight corners, have quick acceleration for commuter trains as well as the necessary power. The answer was obvious. Just build a load more of amended Lockgorn tanks that he designed for the Highland Railway. Clearly though, this wasn't good enough, and the revised plan meant that the Terriers were born, or built. They were classified as A-class engines, so that begs the question why they gained the nickname Terriers. Sometimes the exhaust peaks from the chimney can sound like the bark of a Jack Russell, and their lively behaviour reflects this. Their Westinghouse brake pumps can also sound like a dog panting for breath. Each of the 50 built were initially named after areas of London, but very few have ever actually visited the place they were named after. They were the first engines to receive the easily recognisable Stroudley Improved Engine Green livery, which is described as an ochre or light brown shade with a tiny hint of yellow. However, the strangest part of the Improved Engine Green livery is that there's very little green. Here sparks the claim that Stradley was colourblind, but then it has also been said that it is Stroudley's amendment to the LBSCR's goods green, or liveries inspired from his old Highland Railway days. Green or not, Fenchurch was the first Terrier to be completed in September 1872, but maybe we'll do a video about her in the future. Arguably one of the most famous Terriers was completed on the 21st of December 1875 as part of the third batch. It emerged from Brighton Works with the number 55 and its birth year on brass plates, and the name Stepney painted proudly in gold leaf on the side. On New Year's Eve, Stepney went to its new home at New Cross Gate, where a special roundhouse was made just for the Terriers that lived there. In these early days, all Terriers were fitted with a condensing pipe that used steam from the cylinders and redirected it back into the water tanks. This meant the water could be warmed up before being injected into the boiler, and meant that less coal was needed to keep up the pressure. However, one of the drawbacks of this was that if a train stopped quickly, water from the tanks could surge forwards through the condensing pipes and out the chimney, giving anyone nearby an unwelcome soot shower. Another interesting design feature was that instead of using injectors, water was put into the boiler using a donkey pump working off the motion, so the boiler could only be filled when the engine was moving. This meant that it wasn't rare to see a Terrier scuttling back and forth along the sidings, trying to prevent the boiler from exploding. This method was later replaced, but Stroudley did argue that his engines were not designed to be kept stationary. In 1899, the LBSCR made the decision to reduce the amount of Terriers they had to just 15. Stepney was put on the duplicate list in 1901, and it could have been the end there and then. But then a new job vacancy opened up. The company, now in the hands of Douglas Marsh, was in a critical situation. They seriously needed to cut down costs. One solution was to run motor trains, with only 1 or 2 coaches, to serve rural areas with lighter trains. This scheme would be economical if they didn't have to build brand new small engines to take them. But conveniently, the company now had a whole stockpile of Terriers sitting around doing nothing. And so in March 1903, now numbered 655, Stepney was overhauled and worked these motor trains for the next 17 years, now being painted in marsh umber and being rebuilt in 1912. This A1 to A1X class rebuild was done by Marsh to most of the old Terriers, and included a new boiler and smoke box, a cast iron chimney, metal brake blocks instead of wooden ones, new air brakes and more. This is where their overall appearance changed. As the sandboxes were now put below the frames, the smokebox wing plates were removed, and they began to look just a little bit more modern. Back in 1920, Stepney was loaned to the Woolmer Instructional Military Railway to be used as a teaching engine, before being sent to Fratton to work its last days on the LBSCR on the Hayling Island branch. After the grouping of the big four railway companies, the Southern Railway sorted through their stock and put a lot of the older engines in storage, including Stepney in 1925, with the threat of being scrapped too close for comfort yet again, as it had now survived double its life expectancy. However, and obviously, Stepney survived this second scrapping spree and was reinstated and renumbered to B655 to work the Lyon-Solent branch's push-pull trains. This meant that because of levers and wires connecting the rear coach and the cab controls, the driver could control the train from the back of it, and so saving the need to run around at the end of the line. Stepney was fitted with the LSWR's old push-pull system, and this is what these wires and pulleys strewn across the cab are for. Now renumbered again to 2655, Stepney returned after overhaul on its 64th birthday, as the only Terrier to wear the new bullioned unlined dark green livery, before spending the war years and many afterwards hopping between Fratton and Colonel Stevens' infamous Kent and East Sussex Railway. Then, painted black with British Railways painted broadly on the tanks, and accompanied by yet a new number, 32655, on the 30th of September 1953, Stepney topped and tailed one of the famous Hop Picker specials, with Shedmate number 32636, otherwise known as Fenchurch. This is only significant nowadays, seeing as nobody back then knew that Stepney and Fenchurch would be future Shedmates for many years to come on the yet-to-be Bluebell Railway. When the Kent and East Sussex closed, Stepney was moved back to Brighton, sitting in storage and acting as shed pilot. After a general fix-up, it returned on New Year's Day 1956, with the early BR crest on the side, shunting around some of the key lines at Little Hampton and Fenchurch's old home at Newhaven Harbour, before replacing Poplar as the second shunting engine at Lancing Carriage Works in 1958. If you aren't bored to death already, as you can see from these dates and places that it's worked, Stepney has done well for itself up until now, but the steam engines in Britain were all hanging by a thread before their final demise in the 1960s, with their war-beaten parts wearing out and the new diesels already presenting a promising change for BR. Boxhill had luckily been considered worthy of preservation as part of the future national collection, something that Flying Scotsman hadn't even been considered for, so there was little chance that any other Terrier would receive the same treatment. Then something unexpected happened. In May 1959, Stepney received a new boiler at Eastleigh, the most crucial component to a steam engine. This decision alone is undoubtedly one of two reasons why Stepney survives today. The other was the Hayling Island branch. Because the old Langston Harbour swing bridge that connected it to the mainland was in disrepair, only the lightest of engines were permitted to cross it. Enter the Terriers. Now approaching 90 years old, several Terriers claimed this island in BR days and made sure that this little niche in their careers made them too valuable to scrap. Stepney worked its final years here before being withdrawn at Eastleigh in May 1960. This time it was almost inevitable that being scrapped could not be avoided. Having travelled 1,396,027 miles, steamed through 2 world wars, served under 5 different railway companies, had 5 different numbers, and worn 6 different liveries, Stepney more than deserved to bow out nobly. But no. Just days after it had been withdrawn from service, some people came to inspect the engine. They signed papers and had Stepney moved into Eastleigh Works once more, not to be scrapped, but to be refurbished. According to long-time Bluebell volunteer and ex-Eastleigh apprentice Bill Brophy, the copper cap chimney from Poplar sitting outside was swapped with Stepney's. It had new Brighton-style works plates made, and the symbolic BR crest painted over on the tanks. Eastleigh staff clearly took empathy towards the old engine, because without management knowing, they smuggled other spare Terrier parts on board. Injectors, cab fittings and other useful components were hidden under the coal in the bunker and suspended from wires within the side tanks, all ready for the big day on May 17th. The generous Eastleigh workers were apparently worried that Stepney's new owners would write back to BR and thank them for their generosity, so Bill was sent to accompany Stepney on the journey to warn them. Stopping overnight at Brighton, Stepney picked up 2 coaches that had also been bought from BR, and from there went for a sprint on the Southern Main Line up to Haywards Heath, and then across to Horsted Keynes. Stepney was officially on Bluebell metals for the first time, and became not only the first of many Bluebell engines, but the first standard gauge engine to be saved from scrap by volunteers. The Taliesin Railway in North Wales had proved that a railway could be run by volunteers on a small line, but the Bluebell had raised the bar to others to demonstrate that a big railway could do it just as well.
It's May the 17th, 1960, and Stepney has arrived to meet the press and well-wishers.
Stepney had its original name and number restored for the first time in 59 years. Aside a short time in the original Bluebell black livery for the 50th anniversary of the railway, Stepney has become synonymous in always wearing the iconic ochre livery. The small engines were particularly kept busy in the Bluebell's earliest years, and Stepney was in constant use during the busy seasons. Even more so, it was occasionally permitted to return to BR metals and double-head mainline tours to the Bluebell, either with Birch Grove or the Adams Radial. Now for the part of Stepney's long history that most people watching this will recognise. By 1962, the story of the Bluebell was attracting national attention, and during this year, the well-known Reverend W. Awdry visited the line. 1 year later, and Stepney the Bluebell engine was published as the 18th book of the extremely popular children's Railway Series collection. Within this 4-part book, Stepney, complete with a face, travels up from the Bluebell accompanied by their Metropolitan Chesham coaches, and is a special guest to the engines of the island of Sodor. But Stepney's Thomas connection would go beyond this still. By the late 1960s, the real Stepney was worn out. The predicted cost of an overhaul was at £21,000 in 1977, and the Bluebell was much more focused on keeping the bigger engines running. But that year, someone had the idea of painting a Railway Series style face on the smokebox door, and this immediately attracted the attention of younger visitors. After a number of letters from children writing to Stepney to get well soon, Mr. Jack Owen, who was Stepney's old driver in BR days, and a small band of volunteers set about funding for the engine to be repaired to working order once more. It is said that no other engine has been kept running or had an overhaul funded by children like Stepney has, which stands as a testament to the engine's popularity. With a new rear cab, bunker, tubes, eccentrics and number plates, Stepney steamed once more on the 11th of September 1982. Whilst in preservation, Stepney has appeared in countless documentaries, films, adverts and even music videos. But as well as his own Railway Series book, Stepney plus Face has also become quite the star on the TV screen. In 1979, the Reverend W. Awdry was being interviewed at the Bluebell Railway for a feature on steam engines. Part of the production team for this interview was one Brittlecroft. She had read some of the Railway Series books in preparation, and was inspired enough to get Awdry's permission to turn them into televised adaptations. Everyone today knows the TV success of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, so let's skip a few years. In 1995, season 4 of the show began to air, and included were the 4 stories adapted from the original Awdry book. Now with its own book and a character model within the show, Stepney's popularity soared again, and the Bluebell felt the impacts. But not all have been positive. Becoming such a success, and being bought by several companies over the years, it is said that the brand began to forget their roots, and once attempted to sue the Bluebell for having their steam engine named Stepney, after the TV character. Fortunately, and rightfully, they got away unscathed, but the railway are now mindful about running Stepney with his face, as are other railways that Awdry was originally inspired by. The Bluebell's Day Out with Thomas events were among the most financially successful railway galas in the country, but unfortunately, these came to an end in 2007, when the licensing demands from Hit Entertainment became too much for the railway to handle. The engine itself was worn out, but in 2008 was quickly given a fast-track overhaul to allow Stepney to take part in the Bluebell's 50th anniversary gala in 2010. And later, the opening of the extension to East Grinstead in 2013. 1 year later, having wheezed its way through another 4 years of light work, Stepney was withdrawn having a failed main steam pipe. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Stepney is once more at the very back of the overhaul queue, and in order to steam again, would need extensive work to the frames, the wheels, the tanks, you name it. It has been rumoured that it would be easier to build a replica of Stepney instead of asking any more of the original engine. That debate, of course, is still up in the air. Nevertheless, the Bluebell sort of understood the attention that Stepney attracts them, and after being pestered to repaint it back into improved engine green once more, they made the engine the centre of attention in their new Steamworks Shed exhibition of 2018. On the opposite side of the shed, you'll find a sectioned mock-up of Stepney that teaches you how a steam engine works and allows you to have a go at driving it. Stepney still sometimes ventures out to act as the railway's mascot elsewhere, but for the most part is found here on display behind the safety of glass walls. Do they ever plan to overhaul the engine? The Bluebell's view is to not say never, but at very least for a long time. The cost of overhauling Stepney is not seen as financially or commercially beneficial to the railway. I'll just quickly add that I myself have nothing to actually do with the engine, so whilst I'm grateful so many people have got in contact with me asking whether Stepney will be running when they visit, or whether there's a fundraiser to get the engine back in working order, I'm afraid I'm not the one responsible, though I'm sure that an ongoing fundraiser without a target deadline would prove a treat. Regardless, if you want to pay Stepney a visit, I highly recommend travelling to the Bluebell Railway. If you want to see the original TV series model, then it should be found at Drayton Manor's Thomasland, although it apparently went missing in 2018, and I promise it wasn't me.